I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Hey, tonight we're going to start with the number one topic of concern for a lot of you, and for me too, homelessness. I figured there's going to be a million little steps between the mess we're in now and a solution for everyone, which I know we all hope comes one of these days. And probably there's going to be some missteps along the way. Now, those, according to lawyers that filed a lawsuit, they say the misstep is already happening with the city of Portland trying to enforce its camping ban soon. They say it's a misstep that should be stopped, and that is our big story tonight. The lawsuit was filed by lawyers representing homeless folks. It takes aim at Portland's daytime camping ban, which passed 4 months ago but has yet to be enforced. The lawyers want a judge to just put a stop on the whole thing. The enforcement may be coming soon, by the way, we're told by the city. Blair Best has our story.
At first glance, this pocket of Portland in the Belmont neighborhood is clear of the crisis plaguing other parts of the city. But this hasn't always been the case.
There were just tents everywhere. It felt scary. It felt unsafe.
Elaine Johnson has lived here for 7 years.
All of a sudden it dawned on me, I haven't been seeing a lot of tents anywhere or people on the street doing drugs.
She's not sure what's behind this welcome change, but points to the threat of Portland's daytime camping ban as a potential reason. Portland City Council passed the ban back in June, prohibiting camping on public property from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It also bans camping anytime near schools and high crash corridors, among other areas. And even though enforcement hasn't started just yet, word of the ban has reached the streets. Clyde now moves his tent every day. And Joshua
I have a couple blankets now.
Now carries his bedding and hides.
I try to find somewhere out of the way that I'm not going to get rained on or kicked or maced.
Late last week, a group of homeless people filed a class action lawsuit against the city's camping ban, alleging the restrictions violate the Oregon Constitution, and the penalties, like jail time or a $100 fine after 3 warnings, are unreasonable, arguing homelessness is unavoidable for many, given the lack of shelter in Portland.
I am not even a second-class citizen. I'm a third-class punching bag.
The ordinance is unreasonable.
Crystal Delahanty runs PDX Saints Love.
That'll feel better.
A nonprofit offering wellness fairs and housing referrals to homeless people in East Portland.
It's harmful. You know, you have people who are already feeling rejected and ostracized from community. They can't access resources. They don't know how. And then now you're telling them that they can't even sit down with their belongings on a park bench or a sidewalk.
She wrote a declaration included in the lawsuit.
And the reason that I jumped in as a declarant on the lawsuit is that everyone belongs somewhere.
Lawyers from the Oregon Law Center, which is representing the plaintiffs in this case, are trying to get a temporary restraining order to stop the city from enforcing this ban until this lawsuit is resolved. A spokesperson for the mayor's office tells us they can't comment on pending litigation, but they plan to start enforcing the ban in the coming weeks, and they'll give a 2 weeks heads up.
The ordinance is so convoluted and complex that I don't understand it. I don't know where people would be able to camp.
There is a map showing where camping is allowed, but homeless people must have internet to access it, something we found. Here's the map.
Oh my God.
Is nearly impossible for some.
Well, see, I don't have access to that because I went to federal prison for hacking. So, I'm not able to access any internet device at all.
We're seeing a lot of reactionary ordinances come into place. And we want everyone to just stop and pause and take time to figure out what are the complexities and the nuances behind this ordinance and how does it affect people, rather than we just don't want to see homelessness anymore, let's make it go away.
Like it has in the Belmont neighborhood, at least for now.
I do feel like setting some limits around that is the best way to have things start to change. And it's going to probably, I think, be painful and uncomfortable at first. But over time, maybe this is a start of something new.
Again, this lawsuit alleges that there's a lack of shelter space in Portland, though the city is quickly adding more. The mayor tells us that plans are well underway for the second mass encampment, and he'll be announcing that location very soon. Blair Best, KGW News.
Thanks, Blair. You know, it seems like this is the season for homeless-related lawsuits. The other two recent lawsuits, though, went the other way. On September 19th in California, the Sacramento County prosecutor filed a lawsuit against the city of Sacramento for not clearing out homeless camps. And then 3 days after that, a group of homeowners in Arizona filed a lawsuit against the city of Tucson for also not clearing out homeless camps. Friday, we updated you on yet another lawsuit, this one out of Grants Pass, Oregon, that could be heading to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's all about homeless policy and whether or not cities can punish homeless people for setting up tents or sleeping in public places. We did a full breakdown of the implications Friday, including how liberal and conservative lawmakers are agreeing that change is needed. Find the story on the KGW YouTube channel if you missed it. But if the Supreme Court takes the case and rules in favor of Grants Pass, that would mark a monumental change in homeless policy across the West, if not across the country. One of the big local takeaways from the most recent court filings is this. Between May of 2022 and July of 2023, Portland officials made 3,399 offers of shelter beds to homeless people. 2,560 times people said, no, thank you. So that 75% of the time shelter was offered, the response was no. We asked you for your thoughts and got all kinds of responses after that. How about this one? I strongly agree that the Supreme Court should take up this case. The current 9th ruling has resulted in extensive collateral issues for our communities. Drugs, crime, trash, fires, etc. are increasing in areas where homeless encampments exist. We need a ruling that allows the separation between those who are trying to go forward in their lives from those who are just satisfied to stay the way they are. And Greg wrote to us to say, if I wanted to meet basic survival needs and live in a national forest, would the federal government be obligated to provide me housing? Right now, I believe I would be kicked out and fined for trash.
I agree we need shelter, but they need to do something to make it where people can actually use them and not make them jail cells, which is what, yeah, go to this center here, we'll give you this little pad on the floor you can lay on, but your dog and everything else, you have to leave and let somebody steal them. Portland may have offered, what, $2,500, but, you know, they're bogus. I wouldn't do it if I had, you know, if I was in that situation.
All right, thank you. And how about this idea from Jack? We need to ensure that the homeless and those in need are treated with dignity. Shelters are horrendous. We can get them hotels. We need to raise taxes to fix the issue overall. That way we can put the money into an account to pay for hotels for anybody in need. This is a progressive area. We care for others. Some of you believe that the Supreme Court ruling in favor of Grants Pass would be the start to some of those fixes, while others believe it would be a step in the wrong direction. We'll be watching to see if the Supremes even take up the case in the first place. That's a decision we're expecting to hear by January. And while we're on the topic of homelessness, Portland was once again in the national spotlight over the weekend, the front page of the New York Times. In an article that reads like a dystopian drama, we think it's worth your time. He's a dab of glue in a broken city. Can he hold it all together? In America's overwhelmed downtowns, private security guards like Michael Bach have become the solution of last resort. That's what the article says in the headline. A reporter and photographer for the Times shadowed a private security guard for dozens of hours downtown recently, and this article is a description of what he saw. Intense is one word that I would use to describe it. It could make a laundry list of adjectives, but one thing it does not do is leave you feeling warm and cozy about the state of downtown Portland. Depressed, hopeless, those are closer. You get the idea. The article includes all kinds of data about overdoses and police responses, many of which we've reported right here on the story. But it's the interactions between the private security guard and the homeless that really paint a picture that many of us have seen in our downtown. And one of those interactions was with a woman named Jade, who we have featured on our show 2 separate times. In the Times article, she was suspected in an attempted kidnapping of a 7-year-old child in a downtown parking garage in late July. It's very clear she was experiencing delusions, spray painting her body, refusing to shower, fixating on children, saying she needed to save them from sex trafficking. Just a few weeks before that incident, our own Blair Best was on the streets of Portland with Jade's mom, who searched for her daughter to try to get her help. From trying to get her into rehab to simply begging the police to arrest her, nothing has happened that has worked out so far. And then in the middle of August, Blair found Jade on the street again and worked to try to get her help at the Rosehaven Day Center. That did not work. Blair again found her last month, and Jade told her she was thinking about going to drug treatment. Shortly afterwards, the camp Jade was staying in was cleared out, and Blair has not heard from her or seen her since then. Portland police have had at least one more interaction with Jade as recently as last Tuesday, when she was arrested and released for misdemeanor theft. But her case is just one example of the cycle of crisis that's going on our streets right now. And the front page New York Times article does a great job of showing how people on the front lines, even private security guards, are feeling the weight of hopelessness. According to the security guard in the article, Michael Bach, it's like trying to hold back the ocean with a piece of plywood. Thanks for trying to make a difference out there, Michael. You can find the article now on nytimes.com. Coming up next on The Story, we're taking a break from homelessness to talk about another hot topic, tolling on our freeways and interstates. The young mayor of Westland is blasting a recent tolling survey by ODOT, saying it was slanted in a way to offer up positive responses on tolling when his constituents feel anything but. What the mayor says about ODOT finding funding elsewhere when The Story returns. Tolling in Oregon cannot start until January 1st of 2026. That's thanks to a pause put in place by Governor Tina Kotek. But ODOT's tolling plans, those are still well underway along I-5 and I-205. The most recent development, a tolling survey put out by ODOT, which has some residents and local leaders pretty ticked off. They argue it's slanted, the questions are, slanted in a way to put a positive spin on tolling no matter how you answer. Thomas Schultz has our story.
The state needs to embrace the public opposition.
For years, controversy has swirled over future tolls along I-5 and 205. This month, an ODOT survey asked people to choose between 3 potential tolling options in different ways to pay the tolls, though some elected leaders say the survey was slanted from the get-go.
There is one question, for example, that asks, do you think it's reasonable to pay a few dollars for a faster trip on I-5 and 205? We don't know how much it's going to cost.
KGW previously reported ODOT is considering variable tolling with costs ranging from 50 cents to $2.20 at busier hours. Białoszewski says ODOT also told city leaders the tolling would increase traffic on city roads, a 1% uptick overall, though he hasn't seen specific data on how each road would be affected.
We're not getting that information.
In a statement, ODOT says the survey was just to help the public learn what's been studied so far and to see the trade-offs of 3 different approaches to building the toll system. They say public input is critical, though Białoszewski says they completely ignored criticism of the plan.
So it's a flawed way of getting public input that really doesn't represent the elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room, that many Oregonians don't want tolls to begin with, especially in West Len.
I think it's a really discriminatory thing that they're doing because they're focusing on one area.
In February, before the plan was paused until 2026, ODOT released its environmental assessment of Abernathy and Tualatin River Bridge tolls. In it, ODOT says the average household would pay $575 a year in tolls. Months later, Westland residents and the mayor think the state is pushing forward with the plan without listening to their concerns.
It doesn't have to be this way. There doesn't have to be tolling. There are solutions.
Thomas Schultz, KGW News.
Thanks, Thomas. Other solutions proposed by the mayor include a tax on vehicle miles traveled, which we know is being studied by lawmakers on the Joint Transportation Committee in Salem. Also, possibly a hike on the gas tax, which may not have the intended effect due to more electric vehicles, or some kind of a new tax on electric vehicles. He believes the vehicle miles traveled tax or hiking the gas tax seem the most viable. But let's be honest with ourselves for a moment. In my opinion, if you think tolling will never come to Oregon roads, sorry, you're kidding yourself. I think it is coming. Those other solutions the mayor would like to see instead of tolling, yeah, those might come too, in tandem with tolling. Just my opinion. Some of you might remember this man, Christopher Lee Prey, an attempted murderer suspect who escaped from the Oregon State Hospital while being transported back to the facility from a different hospital to get stitches and an x-ray. It was really a big deal when he escaped. He was on the loose for over 24 hours before being rescued by Portland fire crews. Yeah, he had to be rescued because they were called to a report of a man stuck neck deep in mud in North Portland in a pond. As you might imagine, news of his escape from the state hospital made it all the way up the chain to the federal level. And just 2 weeks after the escape, wouldn't you know, someone from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services paid a surprise visit to the state hospital and reported immediate jeopardy findings. That's government speak for saying, fellas, you got a big problem here. The issues they found were related to, secure medical transport of patients who require what are called secure transport restraints. Prey apparently had those on, but was still able to jump from the back seat into the driver's seat and make his escape. So not so much of a restraint there. Federal rules say the hospital had 23 days to fix the problems or else they would no longer be eligible to get federal Medicare or Medicaid reimbursement. That's big money. So plan came out pretty quick. It was recently approved by the feds and we're getting a look at what's changing. I'll be honest, it seems like a bunch of common sense stuff that you would expect to already be in place, but apparently not. So glad they're making the change now. Whenever a patient requiring restraints is moved, they will only use vans with a barrier between the front and back seats. The hospital already has 4 of those vehicles, they tell us. Patients will need to be loaded and unloaded in secure areas. The hospital calls them vehicle sally ports. That's a secure area, so even if a patient gets behind the wheel, they can't go anywhere, much less escape. And lastly, this might be my favorite, when not in the ignition, the driver must maintain control of the keys at all times. And in case that's not obvious enough, these policies are being updated to reflect the proper protocol. In order to make sure the hospital is following its own new rules, the feds will send someone to Salem on another unannounced visit sometime soon to see for themselves how it's going. Christopher Lee Prey, by the way, was ordered back to the state hospital after his arrest. Coming up next on The Story, concerts will soon return to Providence Park for the first time in nearly 20 years. The big name in rock who will be kicking things off next summer. Plus, it's Monday. That means we're digging for old. what we found in the Historical Society's collection as it relates to the old stadiums where Providence Park now stands. We'll have all that when the story returns. The city of Portland has all kinds of music venues around town, from small, intimate spaces to big old concert halls. But next year, you can once again add Providence Park to that list. It'll be the city's largest music venue, capable of holding up to 30,000 people. Some big names performed there in the past, but it's been a while since the last concert at the stadium. China Green explains.
I think it's just really awesome.
It'll really be fun.
Very exciting. I think that it's a great venue to host concerts.
For the first time in nearly 20 years, Providence Park will bring back shows starting in August of 2024.
It's going to be rambunctious for sure, but I think the Thorns games and the Timbers games get pretty exciting too. So it's going to be just more excitement, a lot of people around. It'll be nice. It'll be a breath of fresh air after COVID and everything.
The Portland Timbers made the announcement Monday morning.
This is something that we feel really passionately about, bringing this kind of activity back to downtown Portland.
Someone get in the back.
Rock band Foo Fighters will be the first to headline a show at the stadium on Friday, August 16th, 2024.
And this is going to be a great new opportunity for our fans and Portlanders to get to see some of the acts that used to have to bypass Portland on their West Coast tours.
I hope it boosts businesses.
Which it will, according to Gary Jondal. He's owned Kingston Sports Bar and Grill across the street for 41 years. He remembers what it was like when the sound of famous bands used to echo throughout the neighborhood.
Tom Petty was there, and that was pretty big. The Beach Boys would come in after Beaver baseball games a lot. They'd bring them in on a trailer and they'd play.
The first ever concert, none other than Elvis Presley in 1957. Other legends that took the same stage include Bob Dylan, David Bowie, Johnny Cash, and Van Halen.
If you get concerts anytime you have something going on at the stadium, it's just a lot of fun for the whole neighborhood.
Providence Park will host multiple shows a year. Over the past few years, the stadium has undergone more than $130 million in renovations and upgrades. It can seat about 30,000 people, becoming the largest venue in Portland.
I think it'll bring probably a lot more young people downtown in this neighborhood, you know, with these new concerts. I think it'll revitalize it. It'll help it a lot.
Oh, revitalize it for sure. Yeah, like a lot of kids. I could see like a lot of teenagers coming to it and stuff, and just like, whoa, dude, the Foo Fighters are coming. Let's go check it out and stuff.
For KGW News, I'm China Green.
Thanks, China. Here's an interesting twist. Because there are so many residential properties around Providence Park, there are noise rules that are going to have to be followed the same way they are now for soccer games. So that means the music will have to wrap up by 10 on weeknights and 11 o'clock on the weekends. That Providence Park announcement this morning got us inspired to check the Oregon Historical Society's collection for anything related to the stadium from decades past. You might say we went digging for old, and we found two small items that have big backstories. We'll start with the older of the two. It's from July of 1925 for the 30th International Convention of the United Society of Christian Endeavor. The group is a non-denominational evangelical youth society pushing for Christian attributes and activities. The week-long event was held at Multnomah Stadium, which is now Providence Park. The opening ceremony was broadcast on radio station KGW AM, which was then part of the Oregonian. Some 10,000 people from across the country attended the convention. Local poet and historian Howard McKinley Corning wore this badge back then. He would later become the poetry editor for the Oregonian in the mid-1960s. And then we have this. This is a printing plate, which is why it looks, you know, kind of backwards, and why you're probably having a tough time reading it. Thankfully, we have incredibly talented editors who can help us out with this. So let's see if we can spin that thing around. There we go. Much better. This is a plate advertising Greyhound racing in the late 50s at Fairview Park, which was renamed Murray Kemp Greyhound Park in the late 70s and then Multnomah Greyhound Park in the 90s. Greyhound racing in the Portland metro area actually started back in 1933, organized by the Multnomah Kennel Club with races held at Multnomah Stadium, which, yes, is now Multnomah Park. See how that all came together there? Kind of worried about that, didn't you? No, we got it. In 1956, Multnomah Stadium needed more room for the Portland Beavers baseball team, and the Kennel Club got shown the door. Greyhound racing would continue through the years until 2004, when the owners of the Multnomah Greyhound Park in Wood Village refused to renew their lease, and that was the end of Greyhound racing in Oregon. How about that, huh? I love those segments. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. But remember, the story, our collective story, well, that never ends. Come on. The good stuff is up next, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.